If you enjoy stories of poetic justice and resilience, be sure to subscribe to the channel for more narratives like this one. Now let me share the tale of a woman who refused to stay in the shadows. The fine china clinked as Lexi Harrison set her coffee cup down on the mahogany table. 6 drops of milk, not one more, not one less. An exact temperature of 62 degrees Celsius. Jake didn't tolerate variations. She watched her husband flip through the Financial Times while adjusting his Hermes tie. Jake Harrison, a Harvard Business School graduate, CEO of Meridian Capital, and, in the eyes of the financial world, a visionary genius. He didn't notice when she quietly slipped away. Lexi had become an expert at being invisible. "Did you see my presentation for today?" Jake asked, without lifting his eyes from the paper. "It's in your email. I revised the projections for the Pythia algorithm, added 3 new parameters, and increased the accuracy to 97%, Lexi replied, keeping her tone neutral. Jake finally looked at her, his blue eyes scanning her, as if assessing an undervalued asset. "Remember, I have the conference with the Asian investors tonight. Don't wait up for dinner." Lexi nodded. She didn't mention that she had spent 72 straight hours working on those projections. She didn't mention that the Pythia algorithm, the system revolutionizing Wall Street, with its almost supernatural ability to predict market movements, was entirely her creation. Her PhD in computational finance from MIT, her extraordinary mathematical mind, her work, all appropriated by the man now enjoying his perfectly brewed coffee. She watched him leave the Westchester mansion, the Aston Martin's engine purring at the driveway. Only when silence returned did Lexi allow her shoulders to relax. On her personal laptop, the only device Jake didn't monitor, she opened the original source code of Pythia. Her phone rang. It was Patricia, her mother-in-law. "Alexandra, dear," the affected voice came through the line. No one called her Alexandra except the Harrison family, who refused to use her nickname. "Our charity dinner has been moved to Friday. I hope you bought something decent this time. The last gala was so embarrassing, that department store dress." Lexi counted to 3 mentally. "I'll be there, Patricia. And please do something with that hair of yours." After hanging up, Lexi stared at her reflection in the living room window. 31 years old, almost 32, PhD at 25, creator of the most revolutionary financial algorithm of the decade, and completely erased by her own husband and his family. The sound of a notification broke her thoughts. An email from Jake's assistant. Urgent documents for signature. Lexi opened the files and began reviewing them mechanically. On the 3rd page, a name jumped out at her. David Lawson. Furrowing her brow, she read the document more closely. It was an employment contract for her position. Jake was hiring someone to replace her. The start date was set for the day after her 32nd birthday, exactly 6 months from now. Heart racing, Lexi continued sifting through the documents until she found something even more disturbing, a detailed plan for her amicable exit from the company she had helped found. Jake was about to fire her from Meridian Capital. The sound of voices from the hallway alerted her. Quickly, Lexi closed the files and returned to the work she should have been doing. The door to the adjacent office opened, and she recognized the voice of Jake's personal secretary, Vanessa. "I can't believe it. You won't believe what I just heard," Vanessa whispered to someone on the phone. "He's been with Alexandra for 6 months and is going to file for divorce at her birthday party. He's been moving money around for months. She won't get a thing." Lexi's world froze. Alexandra. Another Alexandra. 6 months. The same amount of time until her birthday. The pieces fell into place with a painful clarity. Instead of tears, however, something unexpected emerged from Lexi Harrison's chest. A cold, calculated determination. She opened a new document on her laptop and typed just 2 words. Project Nemesis. The first rays of spring sunlight illuminated Lexi's makeshift office in the basement of the mansion. The walls were covered with whiteboards filled with calculations, diagrams, and meticulously planned timelines. For the past 4 weeks, while she continued to play the role of the invisible wife perfectly, she had laid the groundwork for her plan. Nemesis Holdings, she murmured to herself, admiring the work she had done overnight. Through discreet lawyers in 3 different countries, Lexi had established a complex network of shell companies, all interconnected in ways only a mathematical genius could conceive. The phone rang, interrupting her thoughts. "Jake is on the line, Mrs. Harrison," the housekeeper informed her. Lexi took a deep breath, adjusted her voice to the submissive tone Jake expected, and answered. "I need you to come to the office today," Jake ordered without preamble. "We have important investors coming, and I want you to bring those projections you made last week. The ones I sent you yesterday?" "Yes, those. And dress appropriately. They're the Japanese from Sumitomo." Lexi hung up, a cold smile forming on her lips. It was exactly what she needed, a chance to implement phase 2 of her plan. At the Meridian Capital office, on the 50th floor of a skyscraper in Manhattan, Lexi watched from a corner of the conference room as Jake shone. He presented the Pythia projections as if they were the result of his own brilliance. The Japanese investors nodded, impressed. "As you can see, gentlemen, our proprietary algorithm predicts these market fluctuations with 97% accuracy." Jake pointed to a chart that Lexi had created at 3 a.m. the day before. "Impressive, Mr. Harrison," commented the leader of the Japanese delegation. "And who is this lady?" he asked, noticing Lexi for the first time. Jake smiled condescendingly. "This is Alexandra, my wife. She handles the administrative side for me." Lexi maintained a neutral expression, but inside something was boiling. She approached the table, extending a few documents. "Jake, these are the additional terms you asked me to include in the agreement," she said sweetly, placing a folder in front of him. "Oh yes, thank you, dear," he replied distractedly, picking up a pen to sign without even looking at the contents. What Jake didn't realize was that among the legitimate documents, Lexi had inserted a licensing agreement that fragmented crucial parts of the Pythia algorithm, transferring intellectual property rights to one of Nemesis Holdings companies. "Do you need anything else, dear?" Lexi asked with the same artificial sweetness. "No, you can go. I have lunch with Alexandra after this," Jake replied absent-mindedly, oblivious to his mistake. Lexi's eyes sparkled momentarily. Alexandra. The other Alexandra. His replacement was already in the works, both at home and at work. Back at the mansion, Lexi received an unexpected call from her in-laws. "Alexandra, dear," Patricia's syrupy voice came through the phone. "Richard and I are considering making some new investments. Jake always speaks so highly of your work at Meridian. Do you think we could schedule a meeting to discuss some possibilities?" Lexi nearly dropped the phone. In 6 years of marriage, her in-laws had never shown any interest in her financial knowledge. The opportunity was too perfect to ignore. "Of course, Patricia. In fact, I have some exclusive investment options that we don't offer to the public. I would love to share them with you." 3 days later, Richard and Patricia Harrison signed loan agreements with extraordinarily attractive terms through a subsidiary of Nemesis Holdings. What they didn't notice, hidden in the fine print, were acceleration clauses linked to changes in family relations, specifically a divorce between Jake and Lexi. Using the same method, in the following weeks, Lexi offered special financial consulting to her sisters-in-law, restructuring their trust funds with hidden links to her in-laws' loans. The entire Harrison family was now ensnared in a financial web that she controlled completely. In her secret office in the basement, Lexi updated her timeline. 4 months until the birthday, 4 months until the divorce, 4 months until revenge. "You're different," Jake commented one rare night as they dined together in the mansion. Lexi looked up from the salmon plate she had barely touched. "What do you mean?" Jake narrowed his eyes, studying her with curiosity. "I don't know. More confident, maybe." "Must be the new face cream," she replied with a rehearsed smile, returning her attention to the plate. The truth was, Lexi was different. Each small victory in her secret plan had restored fragments of her self-esteem. Each document signed by Jake without reading, each new knot tied in her financial contingency network made her feel more powerful. That night, after Jake left for one of his frequent work commitments, Lexi drove to Brooklyn. She parked in front of a stylish 3-story brownstone and met with a real estate agent. "It's perfect," Lexi said at the end of the house tour. "I'll make a cash offer today." "Are you sure you don't want to consult your husband first?" the agent asked, surprised. Lexi smiled. "Absolutely. The Brooklyn house would be her fortress after the divorce, a place Jake would never know she owned." Using one of Nemesis Holdings companies as the buyer, Lexi ensured the transaction remained completely off the financial radar she shared with her husband. Back at the mansion, she found an email from an unexpected person, David Lawson, the man hired to replace her. Apparently, Jake had instructed David to extract knowledge from Lexi before letting her go. Mrs. Harrison, Jake suggested we meet to discuss the details of the Pythia algorithm. I'm particularly interested in the predictive cause and calibration methodology. Can we schedule lunch next week? David Lawson. Instead of ignoring the email or reacting with indignation, Lexi saw another opportunity. She replied cordially, agreeing to lunch. At a discreet cafe in downtown Manhattan, David Lawson, a man in his 40s with an MBA from Wharton, looked at Lexi with growing admiration as she explained aspects of the Pythia algorithm. "This is extraordinary," he murmured after nearly 2 hours of conversation. "Jake told me you had some support knowledge about the system, but it's clear you are the true creator." Lexi studied David carefully. "What else did Jake say about me?" David hesitated, uncomfortable. "He implied that you were more an administrative facilitator, that the conceptual work was his. And you believed that?" "After 5 minutes of talking to you, definitely not," David replied, with an apologetic smile. "Look, I'm being honest here. If I had known I was being hired to replace the brilliant mind behind Pythia, I would never have accepted the offer." Lexi considered the man before her. Perhaps he could be useful. "David, what do you think about the idea of working for me instead of working for Jake?" His eyes widened. "What do you mean?" "I'm about to start my own company. I'll need talents like you." "But what about the contract with Meridian?" "With Jake?" Lexi smiled enigmatically. "In 2 months, Meridian Capital as it exists today will be just a memory. Are you in or out?" David studied her face for a moment, then extended his hand. "I'm in." Meanwhile, at another restaurant in Manhattan, Jake Harrison was smiling at a brown-haired woman with green eyes. Alexandra Thornton was exactly the type of woman that complemented his public image. Sophisticated, Ivy League pedigree, and connections on Wall Street. "Have you talked to her?" Alexandra asked, taking a sip of her martini. Jake shook his head. "At her birthday party, it will be more impactful." "And the prenup?" "It's bulletproof. She won't take anything beyond what she brought to the marriage, which basically amounts to an old laptop and some department store clothes," Jake laughed. "But don't worry, everything is in motion. The lawyers are already preparing everything." What Jake didn't know was that at that very moment, Lexi was finalizing the most crucial phase of her plan. A critical update to the Pythia algorithm that, when activated, would completely paralyze the infrastructure of Meridian Capital. 2 weeks before her birthday, Lexi sat down at the dining table with Jake, who was distractedly flipping through invitations for social events. "I was thinking," she began casually, "maybe we can do something special for my 32nd birthday." Jake looked up, a calculated smile forming on his lips. "Actually, I've already planned something." "Really?" Lexi feigned surprise. "What is it?" "A party at Marcello's. I've reserved for 40 people." Marcello's, the most exclusive Italian restaurant in Manhattan, where they had their first date. The irony didn't escape Lexi. "Sounds wonderful," she replied with a smile. "Who did you invite?" Jake turned his attention back to the papers. "Oh, you know, the usuals. My parents, my sisters, some business partners, a few friends. Alexandra Thornton would be there, Lexi was sure. The stage for her public humiliation was already set. Perfect. In the following days, as Jake became increasingly absent, Lexi finalized the last details of her plan. One night, she secretly met with a private investigator she had hired months earlier. "Did you get what I asked for?" Lexi inquired. The man handed her a USB drive. "It's all here. Evidence of insider trading in at least 7 different transactions over the past 2 years. Jake Harrison used insider information to profit millions. And you're sure this is enough for a conviction?" "With this material, the SEC wouldn't just convict him, they'd likely send him to prison." Lexi tucked the USB drive into her bag. She didn't intend to use that information immediately. It was just another insurance policy, a card up her sleeve in case Jake tried to retaliate. On the morning of her birthday, Lexi woke up before dawn. She sat on the edge of the bed watching Jake sleep peacefully. In a few hours, his world would completely crumble. "Happy birthday," Jake murmured upon waking, lacking conviction. "Thank you," Lexi replied, maintaining the facade of a loving wife until the very last moment. Jake left early for work, mentioning they would meet directly at Marcello's at 8 o'clock. Alone, Lexi opened her laptop and checked all the pieces of the puzzle she had assembled over the past 6 months. Everything was in order. She dressed meticulously for the evening, choosing a high-fashion black dress she had secretly purchased, something very different from the clothes Jake and his family deemed appropriate for her. She styled her hair in an elegant bun, applied flawless makeup, and slipped a black envelope into her clutch. At precisely 8 o'clock, her private driver, another secret she kept from Jake, dropped her off at the entrance of Marcelo's. She took a deep breath and entered. The restaurant was adorned with white flowers and soft lighting. At the main table, in the center of the room, sat the VIP guests, Jake's parents, his sisters with their husbands, and several partners from Meridian Capital, and seated in the honor spot next to Jake, an elegant brown-haired woman, Alexandra Thornton. Jake's smile faltered momentarily when he saw Lexi walk in. Perhaps it was her straighter posture, or the dress he had never seen before, or the aura of confidence she exuded. Whatever it was, he quickly regained his composure and came to greet her. "Alexandra, dear, welcome to your party," he said, kissing her on the cheek with false affection. Lexi smiled. "What a wonderful surprise, Jake. You really outdid yourself." He led her to the main table, positioning her in the seat furthest from him and Alexandra Thornton. During dinner, Lexi maintained polite conversation with the guests around her, deliberately avoiding looking across the table, where Jake and Alexandra exchanged knowing glances and smiles. When dessert time arrived, Jake stood up, champagne glass in hand. The restaurant fell silent. It was time for the big announcement. "I'd like to raise a toast to my wife, Alexandra," he began, his voice laden with false solemnity. "For 6 years we've been together, building what we thought was a partnership." Lexi watched the faces around the table. Some guests looked confused, others uncomfortable. However, Jake's parents and sisters smiled expectantly, knowing what was coming next. "However," Jake continued, his tone shifting to something harder, "there comes a time when we need to be honest. Alexandra hasn't contributed to the success of Meridian Capital. In fact, she's been more of a burden than a help." Murmurs rippled through the restaurant. The public humiliation had begun. "That's why," Jake raised his glass higher, "today, on your 32nd birthday, I want to announce that our paths are parting, professionally and personally." He looked directly at Lexi, a cruel smile on his lips. "Congratulations, failure. We're done." The room erupted in uncomfortable laughter. Alexandra Thornton smiled triumphantly. Jake's parents exchanged satisfied glances. Lexi maintained a neutral expression as she slowly stood up. The restaurant fell silent again, everyone waiting for a dramatic reaction, tears, screams, a scene. But she simply walked calmly to where Jake was, her heels echoing on the marble floor. Upon reaching him, she slid the black envelope across the table. "What is this?" Jake asked, confused. "Something you should read now," Lexi replied, her voice steady and clear. "You might want to explain to your sisters why their tuition is about to disappear in a few minutes, or to your parents why their house and cars will vanish before breakfast tomorrow, or to our partners why Meridian Capital will be dead before dessert is served." Jake opened the envelope, his confidence giving way to confusion as he read its contents. "Is this some kind of joke?" he asked, his voice trembling slightly. Lexi glanced at her wristwatch. "You have exactly 7 minutes before everything comes crashing down, Jake. I suggest you use them wisely." And with that, she turned and walked toward the exit of the restaurant, leaving behind a table of stunned guests and a husband about to discover the true meaning of the word nemesis. Outside Marcelo's, Lexi got into her car and instructed the driver to take her to Brooklyn, to her new home. As the vehicle crossed the Manhattan Bridge, she checked her phone. 7 minutes had passed. On her laptop, she opened a program that monitored the automated execution of her plan. One by one, the elements began to align exactly as she had projected. The acceleration clauses in her in-laws' loan contracts were activated. Within hours, they would receive notifications that their properties were entering foreclosure. The trust funds of Jake's sisters, now secretly linked to their parents' loans, were automatically frozen. The sabotaging update to the Pythia algorithm was implemented in Meridian Capital's system, causing catastrophic failures in the trading platforms. And finally, a series of automated emails were sent to major investors and the board of Meridian Capital, revealing the truth that Lexi Harrison was the true creator of the Pythia algorithm and that her intellectual property had been legally transferred to Nemesis Holdings, now the majority owner of the technologies sustaining the company. Her phone began to ring incessantly. She ignored calls from Jake, her in-laws, and her sisters-in-law. The only one she answered was from David Lawson. "Is it true?" he asked, his voice a mix of shock and admiration. "Did you really take him down?" "No, David," Lexi replied calmly. "I just reclaimed what was rightfully mine. The job offer still stands if you're interested." "After what I saw today, I'm definitely interested." Arriving at her new home in Brooklyn, Lexi climbed the steps to the entrance with a sense of freedom she hadn't felt in years. This was her fortress, built with her own resources, far from the influence of Jake and his family. 3 days later, as she organized her new home office, the doorbell rang. Through the security system, she saw Jake standing at the entrance, looking disheveled and desperate. "Lexi, please," he pleaded when she partially opened the door. "You need to reverse this. We're about to lose everything. Richard is sick. The girls dropped out of college. Please, if there's any compassion in your heart." Lexi studied him coldly. "How did you find me? Does that matter? I'm here begging. What do you want? Money? Recognition? I can give you all of that." Lexi smiled. "What I wanted, Jake, was to be seen, acknowledged for my work, treated as an equal. But you chose to make me invisible, to steal from me, to betray me, and to humiliate me publicly. It was a mistake, I know, but no, Jake, it wasn't a mistake. It was a conscious choice. A series of choices over the years, and now you're facing the consequences." She started to close the door, but Jake stopped her. "Please, Alexandra." His voice trembled. "I love you." Lexi laughed. "No, you don't love me. You loved what I could do for you. Now leave my property before I call security." A week later, it was Alexandra Thornton's turn to show up at her door. "You must be the other Alexandra," Lexi said, allowing the woman to enter. Alexandra Thornton looked uncomfortable, but determined. "I came to make a business proposal, not to discuss Jake." "I'm listening." "I have evidence of insider trading that Jake committed over the past 3 years." Alexandra opened her folder and displayed some documents. "Information he shared with me, thinking I would be on his side. I want to offer this in exchange for a partnership in your new company." Lexi briefly examined the documents. "Why would you do that?" "Because I recognize talent when I see it, and because Jake Harrison underestimated us both." With a polite smile, Lexi returned the papers. "I appreciate the offer, Alexandra, but I'm not interested in a partnership. However, I suggest you take that information directly to the SEC. They will be very interested." Alexandra looked disappointed, but nodded understandingly. "I figured as much. Well, it was a pleasure meeting you, Lexi. I hope our next interaction is under more favorable circumstances." Meanwhile, at the Meridian Capital office, the board was holding an emergency meeting. The company's stock had plummeted 80% in 3 days. Major investors were pulling their capital. The Pythia algorithm, the crown jewel of the company, had been legally transferred to Nemesis Holdings. When Lexi entered the meeting room, silence fell instantly. All eyes turned to her, the woman they had ignored for years, the administrative assistant who supposedly only helped brilliant Jake Harrison. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, placing a folder on the table, "I brought a very simple proposal. Meridian Capital formally recognizes that I, Alexandra Brooks Harrison, am the creator of the Pythia algorithm and the true intellectual founder of the company. You grant me 70% ownership, and I allow the company to continue operating." "That's blackmail," protested one of the directors. "No," Lexi replied calmly, "it's restitution, and the only chance you have to save what's left of Meridian." After 4 hours of heated discussions, the board relented. Lexi Harrison was officially recognized as the founder and majority owner of Meridian Capital. Her first decision as CEO was to fire Jake. 6 months later, Lexi walked through the executive floor of a new office in Manhattan. The Athena Financial logo shone on the reception wall, a stylized owl, a symbol of wisdom. After taking control of Meridian, she had sold the Pythia algorithm to Quantum Partners for $40 million and used part of the money to start her new company focused on ethical and transparent financial intelligence. David Lawson, now her chief operating officer, appeared at her office door. "We have that conference in Chicago tomorrow," he reminded her. "The flights are confirmed." "Thanks, David. And how's the recruitment process for the new analysts going?" "Excellent. We have 3 PhD candidates who seem very promising." Lexi smiled. Athena Financial had quickly become known for hiring brilliant women in leadership positions, many with stories similar to hers, having their work unrecognized in male-dominated environments. The next day in Chicago, Lexi was participating in a panel on innovation in computational finance when she spotted a familiar figure in the audience. Jake Harrison, wearing a cheap suit that sharply contrasted with the Armani he used to wear. The distinctive Harvard ring he once proudly displayed was gone from his hand. Their eyes met for a brief moment. There was something different in Jake's eyes. Shame, perhaps. He was the one who looked away first, shrinking slightly in his seat before standing up and discreetly leaving the auditorium. Later, during the cocktail that followed the event, Lexi learned that Jake was now working for a third-rate brokerage, dealing with small individual investors. The fall had been swift, from CEO of one of Wall Street's most promising firms to a common seller of financial products. "He tried to use your name as a reference a few times," commented one of the event participants, unaware of their connection. But soon the story of Meridian Capital spread, and no one of importance on Wall Street wants to be associated with him now. Lexi nodded politely and changed the subject. Jake Harrison was part of her past, a closed chapter. Back in New York, Lexi was finalizing the last details of the Nemesis Foundation, a non-profit organization created with $10 million from the sale of the Pythia algorithm. The foundation's mission was to support women whose technological and scientific contributions had been stolen or erased, providing legal resources, mentorship, and funding to help them reclaim recognition for their work. The lawyers confirmed that all documentation is in order, her assistant informed her. "The foundation can officially start operating next week." "Excellent," Lexi replied. "And the apartment for my mother? The deed will be signed tomorrow. It's 15 minutes away from your house in Brooklyn, just as you requested." Lexi smiled. Her mother, a retired math teacher who had raised her alone after her father abandoned them, would finally have the security and comfort she deserved. That night, Lexi went up to the terrace of her office. From there she could see the glow of Manhattan's lights, the city that had almost swallowed her, but now bowed to her talent. The scars from years of invisibility were still there, but they no longer hurt as they once did. Her cell phone vibrated. It was a message from Patricia Harrison, her ex-mother-in-law. "Alexandra, I know you probably don't want to talk to me, but I need to ask for your help. We've lost everything and Richard is sick. The girls dropped out of college. Please, if there's any compassion in your heart." Lexi contemplated the message for a few moments. The Harrison family had never shown her a shred of empathy. They had been active accomplices in her invisibility, in her erasure. Still, she didn't take pleasure in knowing they were suffering. After a few minutes of reflection, she transferred a moderate sum to an account in Patricia's name, enough to help them get back on their feet, but not enough to restore their former privileged lifestyle. She attached a brief message. "This is not about revenge, but about justice. Use it wisely." Turning her gaze back to the city, Lexi felt a peace she hadn't experienced since before meeting Jake. The empire he had built on her stolen work had crumbled, and from the ruins she had created something extraordinary. Not just a successful company, but a legacy of change. Athena Financial was already employing 25 brilliant women in leadership positions. The Nemesis Foundation was about to begin supporting dozens of others whose stories mirrored her own, and Lexi Harrison, once relegated to the shadows, now shone with her own light. In the office below, her team was preparing for a new work week. Women and men who respected her not for her last name or connections, but for her intellect and vision. People who understood that the greatest power one can wield is to refuse to remain invisible. Lexi smiled as she remembered the young mathematician she once was, so talented, so naive, so willing to diminish herself to make others feel greater. That girl had vanished, replaced by a woman who knew her worth and wouldn't allow anyone to diminish it again. As she gazed at the city lights, Lexi reflected on the journey that had brought her here. It hadn't been about destroying Jake or the Harrison family. It had been about rebuilding herself, piece by piece, until she was whole again. And now finally she was. If you enjoyed this story of resilience and justice, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and share your thoughts in the comments. Stories like Lexi's remind us that no one should remain in the shadows when they deserve to shine.